The Madman!
And now, the neutral cards. Starting with Snow Flipper Penguin. This card's actually a acceptable pack filler card. 1 star though. Wretched Tiller is a 1 mana 1/1. It's actually worse than that for them because if they kill it, it actually didn't do any extra damage to the face. 1 star. Dreadscale Knight is a 1 mana 1/1. 1 star. Acris Veteran. 5 stars. This card is a really good aggro card, and I figure one of the aggro decks somewhere out there will pick it up. Probably multiple, maybe multiple. Abusive Sergeant, and it holds the attack permanently. In honesty, old Abusive Sergeant was probably better, but Acris Veteran gets up there. While 1 mana 3/1 Small Time Buccaneer is not played, being able to split up the stats so that the 3 attack isn't on the 1 health minion, and that part of the 3 attack is fast, is good. Tuskar Fisherman, 1 star. Turns out that with the spell damage minions, you're usually running a spell heavy deck and it's very difficult to count on having a minion on the board. So Tuskar Fisherman, as efficiently stat as it is, and being not entirely pack filler but interesting pack filler, is still not good. Tainted Zealot is an interesting card. Sticky spell damage minion. Due to the extra spell damage, if Defile is good, Tainted Zealot is going to be good. Defile will deal 2 damage. And if your opponent has a 2 health minion, the Defile will trigger again, dealing additional 2 damage, killing the Zealot, and then it'll do 1 more damage. 5 damage AoE, 4 mana and 2 cards seems pretty good. Now, given that I have decided to call most of the Warlock cards 1 star though, I'm going to double down on Tainted Zealot and also call it 1 star. Prince Keleseth. 2 stars. I want to give you guys a tangent to the darkest timeline. Prince Keleseth is run in a deck that usually wins about 50% of the time, let's say Zoo. When you draw Prince Keleseth and you play him on turn 2, you suddenly win a much larger percentage of the time, let's say 75% of the time. If those conditions are the case, your 50% of the time win rate jumps up so much when you play Prince Keleseth on 2 that the deck actually becomes really good, and it's solely because you drew Prince Keleseth by turn 2 and you played him. So I do see the serious potential in this card. Maybe Zoo, maybe Aggro Paladin has the super high chance of high rolling it. I'm giving it a 2 just because I'm not entirely confident in that situation happening because I didn't really have that much faith in Zoo. Even though it'll only happen about 25% of the time because that's about the odds of getting the Keleseth and playing it on 2. The 25% of the time where you win 75% of the time improves the win rate a lot. Fallen Sun Cleric. Pretty efficient. Still gonna give it 1 star though. Don't think it quite sees play in these aggro decks. Frygul, 1 star. It's worse than Eggnapper. Shallow Gravedigger, 1 star. It's too slow. Prince Tal'Darim, 1 star. At present time, it doesn't seem like there's any super insane combos with it. Mindbreaker, 1 star. 3 mana 2/5. Meh. Ability too situational to actually run a 3 mana 2/5. Hildnir Frostrider, 1 star. 3 mana 4/4 is good stats, but when you draw it in the late game and you have to freeze your side of the board, suddenly not so good. Happy Ghoul, 1 star. Even though you have the chance to activate it and play 0 mana 3/3s, which is very tempting, it's actually more difficult than expected to do this. Priest can't reliably heal themselves on turn 2 and cast this for 0 mana. True Silver championing into the Happy Ghoul seems pretty tough. Maybe if you have both True Silver Champion as well as the Charging Lifesteal card. I still think not though. Drakari Enchanter, 1 star. While the effect is strong and brand Bronzebeardish, there's currently no end of turn effects that are that strong to combine with this card. Deathspeaker, 1 star. While it's not quite Divine Shield and it has its trade-offs, benefits trade-offs with it, it's still not quite good enough. An example that some people haven't mentioned is you put the Deathspeaker immune on something that continuously deals damage, maybe a Wild Pyromancer, and Wild Pyromancer can keep firing then. So that's the part where it's slightly better than Divine Shield, mostly worse than Divine Shield because Divine Shielding a minion sticks around after the end of turn. Wicked Skeleton, 1 star because in order for it to be good, 4 minions have to die on that turn, which seems difficult. If you manage to get some sort of infinite combo with Defile though, Wicked Skeleton can be pretty big for 4 mana, but seems too situational for that. Taking Abomination, a 1 star. Meme card of the set. I will mention that a 4 mana 5/6 is pretty good, but seems difficult to run a deck which only runs Taking Abomination as a minion. Serenite Chain Gang. 3 stars. I think this card could single-handedly bring buff Paladin back up to speed. And it's also good with a number of other buffs like the Warrior buff, bolster effect, but mainly Paladin, I'd say. Now, and Shaman Evolve has a chance of using this too. It is a 4 mana for 2/2/3s, which can be added up to 4 mana 4/6 of stats. So in theory, it's like just a good card for anyone. It just turns out that a 4 mana 4/6 isn't, even with Taunt, even split into 2/2/3s, perhaps because it isn't actually a 4/6. Maybe that's what causes it to not be that good. Rattling Rascal, 2 stars. Has a chance of being played in 1 of 2 decks. A single target Evolve Shaman, because it sure is really efficient when you spend 8 mana for a Master of Evolution, 4/5. You get a 5/5, and you get a random 5-drop along with that. That is a lot of stats for 8 mana. But more practical is perhaps you simply play it in an aggressive deck. It is a 4 mana 7/7. Your opponent will be forced to use whatever they can to try to kill that 2/2, but you still hit them for 5 the next turn, and that's pretty good for 4. Prince Valinar. Prince Valinar is actually a good card if you can get the 4 mana 4/4 off. I'm gonna give it a 1-star card. Not enough decks can actually get this off. And easiest deck for Prince Valinar to fit in currently, which is a control deck which does want the taunt and the lifesteal, is the Rogue Miracle deck if you cut shares in, as well as Lillian Voss. Perhaps we'll see some experimentation there, but I ultimately didn't think that it would stick around. Phantom Freebooter, while it can get pretty big with Doomhammer, and it can be potentially an 8/5 for 4 with a fresh Arcanite Reaper for those pirate decks out there, and possibly even bigger, I think that the card is ultimately not going to take the place of Naga Corsair, so I rated it a 1-star card. Night Howler is blatantly understated and is a 1-star card. The Meat Wagon, also known as the Meme Wagon, can get a 5-cost card in Validated Doomsayer. It can even get Doomsayer itself, but 1-star card for not really that much payoff for having to put Validated Doomsayer in your deck. Can get buffed, but that's way too much work for not enough payoff yet again. King Banshee, 1-star card, not because of the drawback, but because a 4 mana 5/5 isn't strong enough to be played. P.S. The drawback isn't that severe. Grim Necromancer, 1-star. It's inferior to Serenite Chain Gang. For the token decks out there, appears to be inferior to Violet Teacher, but props for making an interesting pack filler card. It's very close to being great. Grave Shambler, 1-star, 4 mana 5/5, not that great. Can be bigger with the Rogue self-destroying the weapons, but I don't see that deck working. Death Axe Punisher, 1-star. There are very few lifesteal cards in this set, and not enough to run with Death Axe Punisher. Corpse Taker, 5 stars. This is a card that could bring Control Paladin to greatness. I think you can consistently give this Taunt, Divine Shield, and Lifesteal in exactly Paladin. And for 4 mana for 3/3 Taunt, Divine Shield, Lifesteal, that's pretty good, especially leading into Bolvar. Note that some people think it can also be played in Shaman because Valkyr. I don't think it can be. I think it's exactly a Paladin card. Arthas, cute, but 1-star card. Turns out a 4 mana 2/2, which doesn't do anything immediately, is pretty bad in any meta where there is some amount of aggro. Admittedly, pretty good late game deck card though, if most of your games go into the late game. I considered putting it into the Hunter deck because getting a discount of 2 mana on your Death Relic cards makes Arthas a pretty compelling play. But sorry boy, I'm already pretty down on Hunter as well. Veto Master, classic 1-star pack filler card. Atrociously bad. Tomb Lurker, 1-star card, 5 mana 5/3, which draws you a card, isn't quite good enough. Even if you can selectively get that card, it also counts on the opponent's side, so you can get ruined. But your opponent will usually be playing good death rattles. Sometimes nothing dies by turn 5, and it's not even just a hard 5 mana 5/3 draw card. Sunborne Valkyr, 1-star. In its best case, it's a 5/8, giving some of your minions +2 health immediately off to the side. It appears that Defender of Argus might have this outclassed, even though Defender of Argus only gives a maximum of 4/5 total stat value. Turns out a 5 mana 5/8, even if some of the health is fast and can immediately act, isn't going to be that good. Admittedly though, this one is like almost there. Skelemancer, hesitantly a 1-star card. While I fully admit the awesomeness that happens when you Skelemancer and then you follow it up with a Spike Ridge Steed on the Skelemancer, I don't believe it's good enough to run only 2 enablers for the Skelemancer in a deck, because if you don't get the enabler, It is a 5 mana 2/2. It does work as an AoE disincentive, or you can even play it into Doomsayer and then pay 5 mana for an 8/8, and that's pretty good. But that never really happened with a card like Devilsaur Egg either, and that costs 3 mana. So I think the utility isn't there enough that it will ultimately see play past the initial experimental phases. Corpse Raiser, 1-star card. Even though I acknowledge the potential power of corpse raising a card that can then be play deaded for double death rattle value, I think that is way too optimistic. It is Ancestral Spirit for any class with an additional 3/3, but Ancestral Spirit's big draw was that you could cast it on the cheap on a big minion. And part of Shaman's benefit is that they could cast big minions for like 0 mana or little mana. Cobalt Scalebane, 2 stars. The 2nd star not only comes from it being a potential card in Dragon Priest, and no, I don't think Dragon Priest will actually be a good deck, but it also has some outside synergy in just any aggressive deck, which can keep a board early on and then play this down and then constantly buff its other cards. 8/5 in stats for 5 mana is pretty good, and you're splitting up the stats across. And it's not only potentially 8/5, it could be more, but still doesn't quite excite me enough, I'd say. Bloodworm, 1-star card. That's a 5 mana 4/4. It has lifesteal, and lifesteal is better on bigger cards. And you could buff it, you could fetch it with the Curator, but all that I think is ultimately futile when you ultimately boil down to a 5 mana 4/4. Spellweaver, 1 star. Boy, is that super worse than Evolved Kobold. Skulking Geist, 2 stars. It is pretty much the card if you really hate Jade Druid to play. Jade Druid is only 1 deck, so I'm not entirely sure that Skulking Geist will even see that much play as a tech card, which is why I rated it 2 stars instead of the 3 that I would put as a tech card that can switch in and out. I think it's like a level of tech card that isn't high enough to go into the 3-star category, in other words. Nerubian Unraveler, 1 star, because some decks really don't care about your 6 mana 5/5. Namely, any deck that runs aggressive minions. Even against control decks, Fireball will trade evenly for mana for it. Necrotic Geist, 1 star. It's worse than Kel'Thuzad, and Kel'Thuzad didn't necessarily see play that much. Furnace Fire Colossus, 1 star, even though I respect the potential power level of a 6 mana 8/14 after eating Doomhammer, or 11/8 after eating an Arcanite Reaper. You're comparing the 11/8 to a card that can come out a turn earlier, the Hydra 5 mana 8/8. And yes, it can eat multiple cards, but weapons are pretty good cards. Bone Drake, 1 star. I looked into whether or not Dragon Priest would run in this card, and I think it is too slow for Dragon Priest. It can also be considered to be run in any deck, just as a value proposition card, but I don't think any deck would quite run it. And finally, we get to the big 2 cards at the end. Bone Mare, 4 stars. There's a reason why I'm not calling it a 5-star. Super insane card, and that's because I think that it's surprisingly difficult for any non-paladin deck to have a 6-drop available consistently. Paladin already has Spike Ridge Steed. You don't really need Bone Mare as well. There's a certain number of cards that is too many cards reliant on you having a board, and Spike Ridge Steed is sufficient. So the other class that can easily summon things for Bone Mare to get would be the Shaman. Maybe even Elemental Shaman. You play the Firefly, you Bone Mare it. That's a 8 mana play. Pretty strong. You always have the totem to Bone Mare. The question will then only be whether or not Shaman is a good enough class. And I say this mid-range Shaman, which is currently a tier 4 deck in the pre-Frozen Throne meta, maybe it gets pushed up. And then I kind of gave it a 4-star because some other deck out there will probably make use of it. Some sort of board control deck, which can reliably on turn 6 stick a board so that on turn 7 you play the Bone Mare. Maybe that's Zoo, maybe that's some sort of more mid-range token deck. Somewhere out there, the Bone Mare is pretty insane because it's a 7 mana 9/9, some of which is fast if you have a minion already on the board. The 4/4 like immediately goes in there. Maybe Mid-Range Hunter. Mid-Range Hunter can stick that Savannah Highmane. Maybe this card makes mid-range hunter great. The rat pack is pretty sticky. And finally, the big Lich King is the grand finale, which I will rate 5 stars. Seems to be a good go-to vanilla card to put into a lot of control decks. Very fast, immediately impacts the board because an 8 mana 8/8 with taunt draws you that Ysera card every turn. Death Knight card is roughly equivalent in value to a Ysera card. It's kind of Ysera that costs 1 fewer and is faster. Pretty good card. I don't think it's overrated. Hail Dr. 8. And now for the turbo recap of the neutral cards. The Lich King, 5 stars. Bone Mare, 4 stars. Bone Drake, 1 star. Furnace Fire Colossus, 1 star. Necrotic Geist, 1 star. Nerubian Unraveler, 1 star. Skulking Geist, 2 stars. Spellweaver, 1 star. Bloodworm, 1 star. Cobalt Scalebane, 2 stars. Corpse Raiser, 1 star. Skelemancer, 1 star. Sunborne Valkyr, 1 star. Tomb Lurker, 1 star. Venomancer, 1 star. Arthas, 1 star. Corpse Taker, 5 stars. Death Axe Punisher, 1 star. Grave Shambler, 1 star. Grim Necromancer, 1 star. Keening Banshee, 1 star. Meat Wagon, 1 star. Night Howler, 1 star. Phantom Freebooter, 1 star. Prince Velenar, 1 star. Rattling Rascal, 2 stars. Serenite Chain Gang, 3 stars. Ticking Abomination, 1 star. Wicked Skeleton, 1 star. Death Speaker, 1 star. Drakari Enchanter, 1 star. Happy Ghoul, 1 star. Hildnir Frostrider, 1 star. Mindbreaker, 1 star. Prince Taldaram, 1 star. Shallow Gravedigger, 1 star. Vrygul, 1 star. Fallen Sun Cleric, 1 star. Prince Keleseth, 2 stars. Tainted Zealot, 1 star. Tuskar Fisherman, 1 star. Acris Veteran, 5 stars. Deadscale Knight, 1 star. Wretched Tiller, 1 star. And Snow Flipper Penguin, regrettably 1 star. So I have rated a higher than above average amount of cards, 1 star cards, but there is the chance for spectacular failure if Freeze Shaman or if Control Warlock end up being good, because I did rate quite a number of those 1 star cards. And a number of these cards in the set, such as Rogue Weapon Setup, maybe they're good now and I'm spectacularly wrong, maybe they're better in the future. Combined with the fact that this is the second expansion after a rotation, the first expansion is definitely the most impactful one. Now there are more cards, so in order for cards to be good, they have to have an even higher quality. It's at this point in time that I'd like to remind everyone that some of the ratings you'll disagree with, think about whether or not that's because I'm wrong, I super could be, or if it's because you disagree with the rating setup. I know I rated some cards which are actually strong as a 1 star card, but that's because I think that the archetype isn't there yet. Class support for it isn't there yet. And it is tougher to make that call than simply to call, for example, Defile a 4 star card. I tried to, this time around, elaborate more on cards that I clearly underrated even though they seem powerful. And I, again, still don't think that rating cards on their power level is any good because they can't be objectively looked at 3 months down the line when we'll look at the cards and see whether or not they were actually played in the meta. So there's the rating of all the cards in the Knights of the Frozen Throne. As you can see, I didn't pull my punches, and I made some pretty bold calls. Let's hope it pays off, Cotton. I look forward to playing a lot of new decks. You're going to see my best effort at creating decks. You're going to see some meme decks. Look forward to it.